Hi, I'm attorney Gregory Dell, joined by attorney Cesar Gavidia, and we're going to talk about one of Cesar's success stories for an electrician with a Lincoln Financial long-term disability policy. And Cesar, in these videos, we like to talk about the history of the claim, the basis for denial, what you were able to do to overcome the denial, and then provide some tips for people that could help them with their claims in the future. So tell us a little bit about who your client was and the reason for their denial and the type of disability policy language you were dealing with in this particular claim.
So our client was an electrician. He was working for a medium-sized kind of electrical outfit, and he'd become disabled in 2012 from chronic hip bursitis. Okay, he subsequently had a dual hip replacement. And he had to go on disability, obviously, being an electrician, having a pretty physically demanding occupation, having to run, cabling, which is, often could be, depending on the gauge, pretty heavy, having to get into crawl spaces. I mean, it really has you moving around. And it was really, really difficult because of the chronic pain he'd been experiencing due to his hip issues. And eventually, basically, his doctor said, you can't continue doing that job anymore, and put him out on disability. He was approved. Lincoln pretty much approved him back in 2012 without any question. Another thing that's almost never, it's not really all that common, but he was also approved for Social Security disability almost, contemporaneously. So, you often hear, Social Security will deny you the first go around, and then they will approve you if you appeal. But in this case, he got approved pretty quickly with Social Security disability and Lincoln, and Social Security disability standard obviously being a stricter standard at that point in time than Lincoln standard, where basically Social Security found him to be disabled from really any occupation at that point in time.
And so how long was he paid before they decided that he could return to a job?
He was paid almost about 5-6 years. So he'd had his hip replacement. Even though it was a successful surgery, he remained having issues post-surgery. Developed chronic neck pain, back pain, really as a result of the problems he was having in his hips before, because when you go that long with those issues, it changes the way you walk. It throws your spine into misalignment. You really kind of develop these overall, body complications, which he ended up having. And once he you kind of had this, and these things kind of progress over time. It's not, they don't generally get better. Mm-hmm. And he'd gone along basically 5 or 6 years being paid by Lincoln, not really finding any problems until it came to the point that they decided to do a medical review with one of their nurse consultants, who basically looked at reviewed the records he had. It decided that he was able to go back to work in a light sedentary function, which is basically the same physical demand category as his own occupation as an electrician. And Lincoln found through a vocational assessment 4 different electrical type jobs that he could do. And on that basis, they basically said, see you later.
Okay, so the guy has bilateral hip surgery, chronic medical history with now back problems, neck problems, and a nurse just reviews his records and says, you're okay, or you have very limited restrictions, you can do these jobs. How does the nurse have the authority to ignore the findings from multiple doctors that he was treating with?
Well, Lincoln's going to take the position basically that it's within their discretion to have your case reviewed, and reviewed basically by anybody they want to have review it. They felt a nurse, for some reason, was appropriate in this particular case, despite having orthopedic surgeons, despite having MDs qualifying and certifying his claim for disability. They thought a nurse consultant would be sufficient to review the records and give an opinion that would trump his own doctors.
It always disturbs me, though, that when you have a claimant who's been on claim 5-6 years, that means they've had a problem that you as a disability company have agreed with. How could you just look at the medical records and say that you got better as opposed to having that particular claimant examined? That's one question. The second question is, was there something else besides the nurse review that triggered them to say, we think now you could work?
You know, it really didn't require anything more on Lincoln's part in this particular case, which is kind of surprising. You would think they'd send, just based on the history, they'd send him perhaps to an independent medical exam, which is a pretty common thing that we see all the time. Sometimes these insurance companies, and I don't know if it's a matter of strategy or what, or maybe just saving a few dollars here and there, they don't do all of the heavy lifting or the real legwork until and unless that claimant appeals the decision. Because why would they need to do that, right? It's kind of a free bite of the apple for them sometimes. And there are no consequences for an insurance company to deny a claim. The claimant appeals it, and then they overturn it on appeal. They just have to reinstate their benefits. They don't get to recover attorney's fees. It's not any additional cost to the insurance company. So in this particular case, there was nothing done at that point. What we did when we appealed it is we took advantage of that. We sent him directly to an FCE that we conducted over the course of 2 days to make sure that he could fit in everything that we needed to fit in to really completely address and assess all of the physical restrictions and limitations that he had, and to get a real kind of accurate overall picture of what his overall physical functionality would be. And they hadn't done that. So this was a great opportunity for us to jump in and do it and kind of beat them to the punch, which is essentially the reason that we won this appeal and it got overturned and he was reinstated and put back on claim with Lincoln.
Did Lincoln then want to examine him during the appeal, or?
I think that it was, getting ahead of them and jumping in with our own functional capacity exam, with our own vocational assessment that we also did to invalidate those 4 electrical occupations that they somehow arbitrarily decided that he could perform, that I don't think they really had, I don't really think that they could have really done much or anything at that point. I think that the reviewer probably did see that there was some, mistake done at the, internal claim level or at the initial claim level, and they overturned it.
So besides the fact that they said, we don't think you have any restrictions and limitations from the hips, what information did you rely upon to say that now he couldn't do the 4 different jobs that they suggested?
So what was kind of important, what I recommend, is if you see they've done some sort of vocational assessment, or they've come to the insurance company, or Lincoln here has listed these occupations, and in this case they were related to his prior occupation as an electrician. That's not always the case. I mean, I've seen denial letters where there's 4 or 5 different occupations the insurance company's listed that don't have any connection to what the person's education, training, or experience are. Okay, and in this case, we were in that any occupation stage. We were proving that he's disabled from any gainful occupation that he'd be qualified to perform based on his education, training, and experience. So what was important, at least to successfully appeal the denial, was to ensure that we got our own vocational assessment in that basically said, look, based on the physical restrictions that we're seeing here with this functional capacity exam, he wouldn't be capable of doing these occupations and performing these occupations. All of these occupations fall well above his physical functionality. He's at the sedentary level of physical functionality, not at the light level of physical functionality. He couldn't do these 4 occupations.
So you had to hire, in this case, a functional capacity expert who may have been a physiatrist, and then you had to hire a vocational consultant expert in addition to working with his treating doctors in order to prove the medical support. Right. And then you took all of that evidence and put together a 30, 40-page appeal stating your position, and that's what Lincoln Financial relied upon to reverse the denial.
Exactly.
So, well, congratulations on this claim, and now moving forward, what are you doing to continue to protect our clients' benefits from being denied?
Well, look, you can't really do too much to control what the insurance company's going to decide to do in terms of a medical review. But what's really important is that the client, and in this case, we ensure that they're staying on top of their medical treatment. Frequency is really important. You don't want to let 6 months or a year go by without seeing your doctor, even if they recommend that you don't come back to see them for a year. I mean, that's the doctor basically saying, look, I don't expect anything to improve with you. This is a progressive condition, or you're going to basically stabilize here and that's it. But because these insurance companies really, they so heavily depend on lack of treatment, lack of medical evidence when they issue these denials, it's important that you're in there at least every 2 to 3 months, seeing your doctor, making sure that they're documenting all of your complaints, all of your symptoms, all your restrictions and limitations, all accurately within your medical notes, in their medical notes and medical records. So when that medical review does inevitably happen, and it's going to happen, Lincoln conducts them all the time. You're ready. Your claim and your file is well supported. The records are well supported, and you stand a far less chance of being denied.
So your tip is that a claimant, no matter how strong they think their claim is, at least 4 to 6 times a year should be seeing some kind of doctor to document their ongoing medical issues.
Right, and look, I understand it's an expense. A lot of these clients sometimes aren't. Their health insurance may not cover a lot of these visits. They may have to pay out of pocket to some of their treating doctors. But think of it as an investment into your case and into your claim, because if you're not seeing them that frequently, that just means that they're going to potentially rip away the insurance company, Lincoln in this case, is going to rip away those benefits. And then you're going to be left with nothing.
Right, because they argue that you must be okay if you're not getting medical treatment, which is more the reality for someone who's suffering is, I know what's wrong with me, you haven't been able to get me better in years, unless some new medical technology came out or some new medication or something, I'm not going to get better. So I'm basically only coming to you for purposes of either a medication refill or to satisfy the disability insurance company. And that's usually the latter. You have to just satisfy the chart, because there's a person at the insurance company, especially Lincoln Financial, who every month has to say, here's why we're continuing to pay benefits to this claimant this month. And a lot of people don't realize that. It's not just a computer system where they're automatically getting paid. There is a human being at Lincoln Financial who has to approve that claim every month. So,
right. And they have to justify that, up through, I'm sure that they're roundtabling these claims. They've got to justify that when they get to that roundtable and they're talking to their directors and supervisors and they're looking over things and what they've received, what's missing,
right.
And all of these different pieces of the puzzle.
And new people get on the claim periodically, so things change. So you can never let your guard down is the bottom line.
Right.
If you have a Lincoln Financial claim and you've been denied short-term or long-term disability insurance benefits, no matter where you live in the country, Cesar, myself, any of our disability lawyers are available to help you right away. We always provide a free initial consultation, and we look forward to the opportunity to speak with you should you need our help. Hi, I'm Gregory Dell, the managing attorney of Dell Disability Lawyers, and I hope you find the video you just watched helpful. We put these videos out all of the time, and we'd love if you would subscribe to our YouTube channel. Beyond our videos on our YouTube channel, we also have lots of information available on our website at diattorney.com, and we encourage you to come to our website. The goal is that we want you to be educated about the disability insurance process, and when you get to our website, you'll see that we have information all about your specific disability insurance company, your occupation, and your medical condition. And we've designed our website such that you can easily search our website to find things that you may specifically be looking for. Now, at our website, we have thousands and thousands of pages of information, hundreds of videos that you can search, plus we're building a section of reviews of all the disability insurance companies, and we have the Ask Our Lawyer section where you can go ahead and ask us any questions that you may have. Now, we realize that you may not need us right now, but you may need us in the future to help you with your disability claim, and we think one of the best ways to keep in touch is by clicking the button below and subscribing to our channel. And most importantly, again, no matter where you live in the country, we're always available. Just go ahead and give us a call. We're happy to discuss your claim and let you know immediately if we can help you.